It has been 365 days since the White Sox fired longtime front office leaders Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn. Would this team be in a better place had the owner hired someone other than Chris Getz to run the team? Maybe, maybe not. Let's discuss next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. So August 22nd, 2023 was a day many White Sox fans had hope for the future after owner Jerry Reinsdorf finally fired longtime front office leaders Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn. The hope went away a few hours later when the report leaked out about Chris Getz getting the undeserved promotion, and then a few days later, the reasoning behind it made fans even more furious. Let's discuss if Reinsdorf went a different direction, would this year's team be any better in the first segment? Then the Sox lost again last night, 14 straight series defeats and counting. Let's discuss in the second segment if this team will ever win a series again this season. And finally, it's Way Back Wednesday. I had Matt Flesh on the show last Monday to talk about Old Comiskey Park, and I wanted to discuss the 1990 team more in depth since, hey, maybe the 2025 team will surprise like that club did in 1990. Probably not, but hey, hope. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. All right. In the long run, yes, the White Sox would be better served with former Astros GM James Click running the team, or Jerry waiting for Kim Nang to be available, or heck, even hiring former Royals GM Dayton Moore to come in to mentor Getz, as that I remember was one of the rumored ideas to have the front office be run by Moore and then Getz eventually take over. The dream would have been for Jerry to swoop in and get former Brewers front office head David Stearns before the Mets could even ever get him. But that didn't happen, as we know. And in the short term, I don't think any of those four executives would have done much better than Chris Getz has done this year. I don't think Kenny or Rick would be doing much better either. And would a more experienced GM have this team on a path to be historically bad? Probably not. And again, before you start typing into the comments or going crazy and saying, what are you doing, Todd? Why are you saying this? Chris Getz is clearly unqualified. I'll get to that in a second. But this team would be darn bad for a couple reasons, and the same reasons that Getz has faced. Also, again, disclaimer, this is not defending Getz. I declared myself, and I keep going back, but I'm going to say this. I'm mostly out on Getz, especially after the trade deadline and that terrible 3-team trade deadline deal. I mean, he did not meet the moment. He did not leverage his best trade asset in Eric Fedde, and that team has, that has left this team further behind in getting better in the long run. He had a chance to maybe turn around the team's fortunes by 2026. It's definitely now 2027, 2028. And guys like Click or gals like Nang or even more, I think would have done better last offseason to at least have this team be a little bit more competitive than what it is right now, but it would still be a bad team. And it's just the reason Jerry not taking an interview with any of those potential candidates because he thought Getz could turn things around, around quickly, was completely ignorant too for these reasons. And I think that should make you furious. Again, didn't take an interview. Interviews were free. Should have taken his time. Instead was lazy. And just how Getz got the job, obviously, should still make us all furious. But I don't think James Click, who built a very competitive team in Houston, took over that mess that happened with the scandals, the cheating scandal, and kept Houston very competitive. Kim Ng built a playoff team in Florida in a very dysfunctional situation. I mean, David Stearns turned the Brewers into a postseason powerhouse in the smallest market. Well, maybe not powerhouse, but a consistent postseason appearance team. I would have loved anybody from the Tampa Bay Rays or the LA Dodgers, but we got Chris Getz. But I still think any experienced GM would be having issues this season because, again, the clubhouse culture was toxic, and the franchise dysfunction spoiled the Sox reputation on the free agent market. No big ticket free agents were coming here. Part of it was money, which I'll get to in a second. But the other part is why would you want to play for a team where the clubhouse was so bad? Why would you want to play for a manager who is clearly in over his head? Teoscar Hernandez is a class example. He would have been perfect on the White Sox. Instead, he takes a 1-year deal with the Dodgers. Wonder why. Chance to compete for the playoffs, be part of a great franchise, be around great players, or play for a bozo and Pedro Grifol and just an absolute dumpster fire of a franchise in the White Sox. So you weren't going to get really impact players this offseason with just how bad your reputation was. Now, any GM could have countered that by overspending because money drives all. That brings me to my second reason why talented former GMs would struggle, at least this year. And that is the owner was not going to spend the necessary money to get things turned around quickly. Jerry Reinsdorf said, well, we got to turn things around quickly. Well, that would have cost money. And we know Jerry doesn't like to spend a lot of money. A big reason why the previous rebuild failed and only yielded one division championship was the team did not spend enough money to get over the hump. They didn't. They spent money on Josh Harrison to play second base. They needed a long-term solution in second base and right field, and they kept going on the cheap because the owner was just willing to spend just enough, $200 million payroll, when really you probably needed another $50 million. And the other reason a better GM candidate would have had trouble this year was also the gulf needed to make up between the Sox of what they needed to add to catch the Twins and the Guardians in the standings was just too big. If I remember correctly, Josh Nelson of Sox Machine, he did the math, and the Sox needed to basically add a crazy amount of WAR in free agency and trades to make up that gap. It was just going to be nearly impossible. I think it was like 37 in WAR or something. It was a crazy number that basically you would have had to sign Shohei Ohtani, which the owner laughed at the idea in the press conference hiring Chris Getz. So that wasn't going to happen. And that is not to say Click or Nang or even Peter Bendix, who the Marlins hired to replace Kim Nang, would be the better choice in the long run. Practically everyone on the market was a better choice than Getz. Getz failed at his job at player development. And he speculated to have gotten the job because he got in the owner's ear that his failure wasn't his fault. It was Nick Hofstetler drafting bad players. It was Kenny and Rick messing things around. It wasn't his fault. And if you give me, it was also speculated if Getz got the job, he could do a way better job. And I also believe it was 670 The Score's Lawrence Holmes, who talked to some people around the league that said, Getz could be a GM someday, maybe in a few years, but not right now. And now he's being tasked with the biggest rebuild in franchise history since Larry Himes in the late 1980s. And you and I have to hope Getz and his front office is capable of pulling off what basically Himes did to get the team to be one of the best teams in the 90s. And do you think Getz, Josh Barfield, Mike Shirley are capable of drafting 4 years in a row where you get a Hall of Famer in Frank Thomas, 2 ace pitchers in Jack McDowell and Alex Fernandez, and one of the most underrated third basemen in baseball history in Robin Ventura, along with trading away beloved veterans such as Harold Baines for future pieces such as Wilson Alvarez? Do you really think that those three, because those are the three that matter, are going to be able to pull that off? I'm skeptical. I'm especially very skeptical after the trade deadline. I'm still hopeful in Mike Shirley, but Chris Getz, after the trade deadline, very skeptical. Now, I'll give him his flowers. for Chris Getz. Eric Fetty was a great signing. Bringing in Brian Bannister to essentially run the entire organization's pitching was brilliant. Finally convincing Jerry to cut the cord on Pedro Grifol and giving Grady Sizemore a lick was, I think, a good move. Hey, even signing Paul DeJong to replace Tim Anderson, okay. Obviously, agreeing to move Garrett Crochet to the rotation was smart. Moving Michael Kopech out of the rotation was too. And getting anything for Eloy Jimenez in a trade was also a good move. That's why I'm only mostly out on Chris Getz. You know, getting something more than a bag of baseball for Eloy is, to me, still the sign of, hey, there might be something there. And I was also think he was smart to realize he had to bring in players with character to improve the clubhouse culture and thus improve the team's reputation in the free agent market. But where he failed is he put together a terrible bullpen. He actually gave DeJong a major league contract when he probably could have signed him to a minor league deal with an invite to camp. The team kept going with bad veteran players this year, thinking they had value on the trade market like Mike Clevenger, and that cost Jonathan Cannon some precious development innings at the big league level. He also tried to showcase Tommy Pham, who, again, good veteran ball player, but his market was already established last year, and it cost Dominic Fletcher precious development time at the big league level. And I talked about this in more detail on yesterday's show in segment 3, if you want to go back. And trying to upgrade the defense failed horrifically, and that left the team with a absolutely weak offense. And he signed way too many former Royals players to see if they could improve the clubhouse. And it was the bad ones, or the ones that were way over the hill, like Mike Moustakas. He gave up on Jesse Chavez and Kevin Pillar way too quickly. And oh yeah, trying to construct a team for Pedro Grifol's FAST acronym, that was just a bad idea from the get-go. So I would say a veteran GM would have probably done a bit better and maybe actually build up a more modern front office this year. But again, Jerry didn't want to do that. He wanted to turn things around quickly. Chris knew the team, knew the guys. And also, Chris wasn't going to rock the boat. Well, it sounds like he's starting to try to get some more changes. But he wasn't going to make the front office into something that should be run in 2024, where Jerry thinks front offices should still be running like Branch Rickey did it in the 1950s with his beloved Brooklyn Dodgers. And think about it, Jerry actually cited if he could go back and hire Branch, he would. Although I think Jerry has a bad sense of Branch Rickey. I mean, that was a forward-thinking GM in the 40s and the 50s. Not saying he would embrace analytics, but I'm just saying I think Jerry thinks, you know, we should still be old school. No analytics. Well, it's like, dude, you worship a guy who signed the first black player. You know, that was revolutionary thinking at the time. Anyways, honestly, Jerry doesn't like the numbers and the money being spent today, and Getz took advantage of that. And I would feel more comfortable with a proven veteran GM to do this full-out rebuild than Getz, but this is what we gets with this owner. Yes, play on words was intended. Well, the team Chris Getz has put together is on track to lose 124 games. The Sox lost 4-1 last night to the Giants, and that is the 14th straight series defeat. I'll discuss after the break why I don't think this team can win another series the rest of the season next on Locked On White Sox. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, or eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox wrap up a 3-game series with the San Francisco Giants today. First pitch is at 2:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also, follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts if you haven't done so already. All right, I could turn out to be wrong, but I'm just going to declare it and say Sox are not winning another series the rest of the season. At a minimum, they are not sweeping anyone the rest of the year. So say hello to the White Sox going 38-124, the record they're on pace for, and say hello to winning rarely like you and I have seen all season. You can definitely say goodbye to any potential winning streaks. I mean, if the Sox get a winning streak, that would be one of the best accomplishments Grady Sizemore will have this year as the interim manager. I just don't see the White Sox winning another series the rest of the season. The Sox are up against a struggling Robbie Ray. He missed the first 3 months of the season. He didn't even get out of the first inning in his last start. And I know it's still Robbie Ray. He's still a very good pitcher. But he's struggling right now. And he looked vintage last night as he gave up a run and struck out 9. The Sox had a chance to run into a starter not having his best stuff, and they got handcuffed. And that is what has been happening a lot this year. I had Jordan Lazowski from Sox on 35th on a couple weeks ago, and he even said, when they had that 21-game losing streak, one of the most baffling parts of that 21-game losing streak was the Sox just could not run into, a starter having a bad day. Baseball practically guarantees that you're going to run in to guys not having their best stuff. And you should score enough runs to win. Baseball, the season is basically set up. You're guaranteed to win 60. You're guaranteed to lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42 that matters. And that doesn't even apply to the White Sox this year. That's another reason why I just don't see them winning another series. Nothing traditional baseball states applies to this team. That's how bad they are. The offense is so weak and pathetic that even when they can run into a pitcher without his best stuff, they still got a great chance of losing because they're not going to produce enough runs. And the defense, once again, put starter Davis Martin in a bind. You can never trust the Sox bullpen, who walked 5 batters last night. And I mean, it's a miracle that the 3 bullpen arms gave up just 1 run. But that's the other thing. The Sox can't afford to keep giving extra outs, and yet they do it on a nightly basis. They rarely have a game where it's like you get 27 outs and that's it. We're not making errors. We're not issuing a lot of walks. It's 27 outs. I think you got to go back to last Monday when they beat the Yankees 10-2. That was probably the best game that they've played all year. But the problem is, and that is one of those rare times they ran into a bad starting pitcher and a bad bullpen arm, and they were able to take advantage. It usually doesn't line up. And as I've said it before, the Sox path to victory is a narrow one. The offense typically has to score 5 or more runs, something that is rarely done considering the team averages 3.1 runs a game. The pitching and defense has to limit the opponent to under 3 runs, which again is hard for them considering opponents are averaging nearly 5 earned runs a game. I'm talking about earned runs. That's 5. Just too narrow of a path for the White Sox to maintain for over 1 game, let alone 3 or 4, which is usually what you need to win a series. Okay, maybe even 2. It's hard for them to maintain 2. Because usually what happens is they get that one path to victory, and the next day it's bullpen blows a lead. Had a chance to beat Oakland, had a chance to win that series, bullpen coughs off the game, coughs it up. They don't come back. I believe they're 0-74 after being down after 7 innings. And let's not forget, Chris Flexen is still getting starts, and he keeps putting runners on, and you have to pray he can limit the damage, which he isn't doing lately. Garrett Crochet is only pitching 4 innings. So, while he had a better outing, you can tell that innings limit and pitching this many innings is starting to wear on him. I still think he's a stud. I still think he's an ace, but you're not getting the full benefits of an ace because he's only going 4 innings. Jonathan Cannon is the only workhorse in that rotation. And I love Martin and Kai Bush in the rotation, but Davis gets no run support, so it's really hard for you to be like, well, they're going to win today. Davis Martin has been putting him in a spot to win, but he gets no help. And Kai Bush, he still has to command the ball better for you to really feel comfortable to say that, hey, the Sox are going to win this game. And then there's the bullpen, which is still using the likes of John Brebbia and Chad Kuhl, which I talked about yesterday. And the schedule just doesn't scream that this is a series victory for the Sox the rest of the way. You got 4 against the Tigers coming up, where you got Flexen on the mound on Friday and Tariq Skubal going for the Tigers on Saturday. So at the very best, hopes and dreams, thoughts and prayers, you might get a split. The Rangers then come in. Sox were competitive against them in Texas, but too many of their problems showed up against the Rangers, and Texas is just the better team. The Mets are in the wild card race, so you best believe they're going to be like the Giants right now and make sure that they stay right against the Sox. I mean, the Giants are definitely like, oh man, this is a get-right team for us. We're picking up some games in this wild card race. Sox then have to go to Baltimore and Boston. Yep, that's a losing streak. Home against Cleveland. Okay, the Sox have played the Guardians tough this year, and they seem to be like Cleveland's version of the Sox version of the Royals. When the Royals were bad, remember the Sox just could never beat the Royals. When the Sox were somewhat competitive during their during their contention window. So on the context, there's a chance for a series. The Sox couldn't win in a series in Oakland. What makes you think that'll change at home? They go to the Angels and they have the Angels at home in a battle of let's get the season over with. Maybe it's shot, but one of those series is on the West Coast where the Sox have been awful this year. You have at Padres, who will be in the wild card race, and at Detroit, where the Sox don't play well on the road. So realistically, this team probably has 3 more chances to win a series, and only one of them is because of context. Not very confident. Let's get into some fond memories. It is Wednesday, so that means way back Wednesday, and let's dive into that 1990 team that shocked the world by winning over 90 games after the break on Locked On White Sox. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. My buddy living behind the Cheddar Curtain uses PrizePicks to make his selection on NFL Sundays because of its availability there. And I think it's great for how easy it is to use. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, run your game. And the Sox wrap up a 3-game series with the San Francisco Giants today. First pitch is at 2:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all my everydayers who stick with me this long. Love you guys. Again, love the community that we have on YouTube. And again, with the Chris Getz on the first segment, if you disagree with me, that's fine. We can disagree. And all I'm saying is, I don't know if a GM would have done better this year. Somebody else would have done better. That's all I'm saying. The long run, I think practically anybody on earth would do better than Chris Getz in the long run, because I'm just not very hopeful on Chris Getz. All right, anyone who cites the new playoff format as watering down the regular season, or the playoffs should be about the 2 best teams facing off in the ALCS and the NLCS, and then the winner goes on to the World Series, I always present the 1990 White Sox, who won 94 games and didn't make the playoffs, as exhibit A of why people should stop making the World Series seem so sacred. Honestly, the season, there's a 162 game season, and then there's a postseason tournament. And you're going to have variance. I'm sorry. But you're not always going to have the two best teams in the prior format. And 1990 was an example of that. The Twins winning in, 1987? They won like 87 games. So the old format, new format, it's not always going to get it right. Just enjoy that. And yes, I would love like baseball to have kind of what hockey does, where you actually like have a trophy for the regular season champion, and then you have the postseason for a postseason championship. And the reason why the Sox didn't make the playoffs in 1990 was, again, it was just two division winners go to the playoffs, and the star-studded Oakland A's happened to win 103 games that year to win the AL West. The Sox finished second. They were better than the AL East champs, the Boston Red Sox, who finished 88-74. So just remember that year as an example of why the old playoff format didn't always get it right and why you needed a wild card. And the Sox, that 1990 team should have had a shot at the postseason, but we didn't have three divisions, didn't have a wild card. Anyways, that club shocked everyone as the Sox went from 69-92 in 1989. And I remember that 89 team. That was like my first conscious team. That's when my dad started taking me to ball games. That was a god-awful team. And they were dead last in the AL West to 94-68. And they did it with an emerging young core of talent, an aging Hall of Famer, and by playing small ball. That's the most amazing thing. Carlton Fisk led the team in homers that year with 18. Frank Thomas played just 60 games that season. No regular hitter hit over 300, as Fisk and Johnson tied for the team lead in average with a 285 clip. What they had was Greg Hibbard, the Bulldog, and Jack McDowell anchoring a very solid rotation. I mean, Eric King had a solid season in the rotation, and the bullpen was just darn good. Bobby Thigpen saved, I believe, 57 games that year, which was a major league record. Plus, the offense was always able to take the extra base. They always put pressure on the opponents, and they were managed well by Jeff Torborg. They did not panic when they got down. They had 41 comeback victories and 7 walk-off wins. And they found ways to win. I mean, they won a game where they didn't get a hit. Andy Hawkins threw 8 innings of no-hit ball, and the Sox somehow won 4-0 on a whole bunch of errors. They actually went to Oakland, faced that star-studded lineup of Jose Canseco, Dave Stewart, Mark McGuire, Dave Parker. I mean, it was just a star-studded lineup, and they swept them. They limited losing streaks as the longest was 5 games. But the problem was that, they did lack star power, and Oakland had it. And there was no wild card. And that is probably I would say the 1990 team is the most underrated team in club history. Obviously the 77 Hitmen and the 72 Dick Allen Sox are two other beloved clubs that made a case for the postseason but fell short. But I think those teams were more talented when you just look at it up and down. That 1990 team was emerging. That was a bonus year. And yes, they took a step back in 91 when they moved to New Comiskey Park. 92 was still one more year that they just had to, add some more pieces. But then 93, man, Game 5 goes a different way. And if the 94 strike never happens or gets resolved in time, I believe the Sox win the World Series in 94 for sure. I'll die on that hill. And the 90 Sox, they just played good baseball from Game 1 to 162. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll be back tomorrow with On Tap Sportsnet's Besnik Zakuri. I'm going to have to get his pronunciation right for tomorrow's show. To discuss the past week and a half, since I was obviously on vacation, ran that fan series last week. Kind of want to get somebody else's thoughts, too, on what's been going on with the White Sox lately with Grady Sizemore as the interim manager and Pedro Grifol being fired. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the alternate reality where Jerry Reinsdorf hires a different GM, but that GM probably would have had the same results as this season. The Sox probably not winning another series again this year, and way back Wednesday love for the 1990 White Sox. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will talk to you tomorrow.